Imagine you're at a barbecue with someone, and how would you introduce yourself? Someone who's never met you before.
Well, it's a really hard question, Anthony, because I can easily just spill my guts everywhere and tell anyone my life story.
Yeah.
But I've sort of learnt that, sometimes that's not always the most appropriate thing to do. So, I'd start off with, hello, my name is Damien, and sort of gauge the conversation, I suppose.
Yep. So, what do you do for a living? That would be the next obvious question.
So I've just gotten back into scrap metal. I'm a machine operator. I love my job. I drive big toys and smash stuff. It's very, very therapeutic. Never be in a bad mood for long.
That sounds like a very manly job. That's great.
It's great.
So like wrecking cars or refrigerators or whatever.
Yep. Okay. All of the above.
Cool, great. So you can just let it all out.
Yes. So there is. I do have to. Make the boss money. So it's upgrading the material. With cars, it's the motors and that sort of stuff. And with fridges, it's the condensers and the bits of copper. So,
okay. And that's is that at Queanbeyan or Fishwood?
Oaks Estate.
Okay.
So in between.
Okay. Cool. So let's rewind your life from where you are now. Say 10 years ago.
Yep.
What was Damien Wilkie? Who was Damien Wilkie 10 years ago?
So 10 years ago, Damien was 32, living just up the road in Canberra with my partner at the time and my two young children, Melissa and Luke. So Melissa would have been 4 and Luke would have just been born at 1 year old. I worked in scrap metal. I wasn't doing scrap then. It would have been just before I started in scrap. I was working for the Salvation Army in one of their stores, not as a Salvationist, but just as an employee. I worked 5 days a week, paid the bills. If I get really honest about what I've learned about myself in this last 10 years, I was a bit of a distant partner and a distant father. My hobbies were drinking beer and smoking pot and partying. I even had a friend say to me once that she thought, just because I had a partner and children, I lived a very single man's life. And that really impacted me when she said that, because I'd never seen that. I thought because I was paying the bills and bringing home the bacon, I was far from a single man. But the lifestyle I led was very selfish, alcoholic sort of life.
And from the outside, like an outside observer, I'm guessing that may have looked like a fairly normal sort of Australian male sort of working class life.
Yeah. So only one person ever said that to me. Everyone else was drinking at the pub with me and going out on a Friday night and coming home on a Sunday. So it was very normal. My life, I thought, was nothing unusual at all. Like, that was the crowd I hung with, and that was, what I'd seen my whole life. So it was very normal to me.
So how did your life change from that point?
A lot. So where I am today is I just celebrated 3 years of sobriety last Sunday, which is an amazing feat for me. I sort of got to a point in my life about 5-6 years ago where I was very dependent on drugs and alcohol. I felt I couldn't function without it, and sort of realised that my life wasn't a normal life anymore. It was a very unusual life, and it was a very shallow and sad and scary life, if I'm totally honest about it.
So when you say you realised that your life couldn't function, what are some of the details? Sort of give me an example of how you know when you need it just to function.
Yeah, so I ended up going to rehab, and the reason I went to rehab is because I felt if I didn't have a certain drug in my system, it was like I couldn't breathe. So, and I don't mean I was like, well, I was in panic attack. I just couldn't function without it. I was very suicidal thoughts without it. Got to the point where this very bad, dangerous, illicit drug was the only thing that could make me feel normal. So got to the point where I knew I was over medicating. I knew I was in a really, in a trap with drugs. But as I said, when I wasn't on it, I was just uncomfortable, panic attack, suicidal, and just couldn't face the world, couldn't face anything. So, and therefore I needed help.
Wow. So just feeling normal was in itself a challenge.
Yes. Yeah.
But I'm guessing that wasn't the only challenge, because that has other repercussions, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I was trying to live a so-called normal life. I was trying to be a father. I was trying to be a good employee. I was trying to be a friend. I was, trying to be a partner. And then, juggling a drug addiction with that. Yeah. Even normal, to feel normal, was still very abnormal.
Okay, so you put yourself in rehab. How did that go?
It was scary. I spent 1 week in detox, which was pretty full on. After a few days of no substance, because I'd abused substances since I was a teenager. So it was the first time in like my whole adult life that I'd gone, a week without putting any sort of substance in my body, whether it be drugs or alcohol. I'd gone the occasional day here and day there throughout that 25 years of uncomfortable living. So detox was really eye-opening for me and made me sort of realise that it was so much more than not drinking or using. A week in detox, went straight to rehab, and it's set up in different levels, and the first level goes for 3 weeks, and I was there for 10 months, but that first 3 weeks felt like the longest level out of all of them. It was very confronting, just lots of fear, lots of crying, lots of tantrums, just lots of learning my body, which and my mind, just lots of that. But the best thing about that first 3 weeks is I met a man, Gordon Jackson, who I actually rang on my 3rd birthday to let him know how much I love him and appreciate him, because he was the man that got me asking the question, about God. And I've thought about this a lot, and it was not that I never didn't believe in God. It was just I didn't care. I just never thought of, just didn't care. So I was too busy, just trying to get through life. So in that first 3 weeks, I made a very close friendship with this fella Gordon, who was the pastoral care worker at the rehab.
So I'm really curious to know how people go through this journey of change, and quite traumatic change, quite huge change. Yep. Can you talk more about what happened in rehab that you found helpful, that helped you want to change?
Yeah, what helped me the most was being open and honest enough to know what makes me tick. And it's hard, and that is confronting, and you don't do it in the first couple of weeks. To be honest, 3 years later, I'm still doing it. And just really listening. So I sort of come from a background where I thought I was doing everything right, and the ego sort of steps into play, and you think you're an adult. But when I turned 40 in rehab, and to have people telling me what to do was hard, especially people that are younger than me as well.
Very humbling, yeah.
Yeah, and it was.
Yeah. So you'd always kind of believed that there was a God out there, but somehow he became a little bit more real to you in rehab. Walk me through that.
So I've got another good friend who I now go to church with, Ian Wayne, and he was my friend, all through, as young at sort of college, young adults, and we used to do all the same things together, which was, a life of partying, unhealthy living, and all of a sudden he was my mate that was not drinking or using, and he was going to church. And so when I was in this Salvation Army rehab, it sort of dawned on me. I thought, is this what Ian done 20 years ago? So I reached out to Ian, and it wasn't his story. His story is different, but he came in and started helping me. So sorry, your question was what got me started thinking. So the rehab I was in it's a Salvation Army rehab, so it's a Christian organisation, but their rehab is based on the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a very spiritual program, not a religious program, but a spiritual program. And the more I was looking into 12-step fellowships, the more I realised that the people that had a really good recovery, they had what I wanted, were people that lived a very spiritual life. And the more I'd spent time with the rehab, the more I spent time with Ian and Gordon and the Salvation Army, the more it made me question about God. And as I said, it's not that I didn't believe. If anything, I thought God was against me. I'd sort of realised about rehab, made me realise why I functioned the way I did, and a lot of it was because of things that were out of my control as a child. So my relationship with God straight away wasn't the best relationship, but we work on that every single day.
Yeah, I'm blown away by those 12 steps, and I've only had a sort of a casual sort of introduction to them. But that first step, correct me if I'm wrong, that's basically an admission that we need God's help. Is that right? Is that the one, or is that what's the first step?
Is admitting that you are powerless over alcohol.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah.
And what was the second step?
Admitting to God that we need His help.
Yeah. Which for me is, in a broader context, like a metaphor for life.
Yes.
We human beings are just so complex, and we wrestle with this darkness within us, like that the Bible calls sin, in so many different ways and shapes and forms. I mean, for some it can be alcohol and drugs, for others it could be something completely different. And I'm certain of that. We have to come to that point, and it's really the grace of God that brings us to that point where we say, this is too strong for me. I can't deal with it by myself. I need God's help. Okay, so after your first, so what happened from that point? You Ian is back in your life, and help walks you through that. Lots of encouragement, I would imagine. And so what has changed since then?
So back in the early days of rehab, as I said, I learnt what made me tick. I learnt about these traumas. I learnt why I didn't want to exist, really. I learnt why I numbed myself for so long with drugs and alcohol. Sadly, I didn't hit my rock bottom till 25 years later of substance abuse. Otherwise, I may have got that message a long time, because it did just help me get through life forever. So those early days just really helped me deal with my past and deal with what I'd done through my addictions, and a lot of it for me, what was the hardest was forgiving myself.
So what's helped you come to that point of forgiving yourself?
Oh, look, doing the program, connections with my friends, and asking God for the forgiveness. And although it wasn't as simple as just asking God to forgive me, I had to mean it. And that's taken a few years. It really has, and not because of God's part, but because of my part, being willing to accept that forgiveness, because that was ingrained in me from a very young age, that I was not worthy of anyone's love, let alone God's love. So, that took a lot. And, it took not just 12-step fellowship, not just my church, not just the rehab. It also took a bit of outside work with psychiatrists, which, I'm a massive believer if God works through others. And it was just recently that I had a massive spiritual awakening with a psychiatrist about my self-worth, which all comes down to the forgiveness of myself.
Awesome. So, looking back now at where your life is now, what has changed inside you?
Well, inside me is that I don't hate myself anymore, and that's huge for me. So, and because I don't hate myself, I'm just so much easier to be a much better person. That's a difficult question. What's changed inside me is that I feel God's grace now. I'm so much more my intuition of how my body works spiritually, that just that gut feeling sort of stuff. I'm a lot more better at that sort of stuff now.
Yeah. So let's get down to specifics now about who is God to you? Where does Jesus fit in? Because a lot of different ideas of God out there, but the Christian God is what distinguishes Jesus from the others.
Yeah. Again, another really hard question, but for me, see, in 12-step recovery, God, higher power, can be so many different versions.
Yep.
For me, my God is a loving God who loves me, and I can rely on with anything. And again, it's taken me a while to understand that. So I've got learning disabilities. So reading the gospel isn't big for me. I'm a big listener of it. It talks to me. I can hear the same thing on different days, and it will speak to me differently. And that's how I get my learning of God. But my personal relationship with God is just me and Him, and just love. I suppose that's my God is the God of love.
Yep. Awesome. So the future. What can you tell me about what's coming up?
So look, for the first time ever, I look forward to the future. When I was younger, I'm 42 now. When I was younger, I remember thinking I didn't want to live till I was 40. I thought that was old. And then as I got a bit older, I was like, 50's enough for me. Now I want to live forever, Anthony. I do. I love my life, and I want to live forever. Where I want to go with my life, I got to be very careful with projecting too far into the future. I really am one of these 12-steppers, a day at a time sort of thing. But where I see my life is helping others. I've got such a passion to help others, especially people similar backgrounds of mine. I'm very fond on men's mental health. And although, I'll probably never have a degree and that sort of stuff, the way I help is I like to listen. The Salvation Army taught me how to listen. So as I said, I'm not a big educator. I'm not big on being educated. I'm not big on learning through books. I'm more get out there and do it hands-on. So that's how I want to give back. So something in the future which is very exciting. My friends at the Braddon Salvation Army, when they open up to service and ministry next year, it's going to be a recovery church, and not just for people suffering from substance abuse, but any type of recovery, any type of trauma, anything. And they've asked me to be a part of their team, and we're doing bonding, growing things at the moment. And so that's really, really exciting for me, that I can be amongst this church and be amongst helping people recover from whatever's going on.
Awesome. Well, mate, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you more and more over the last couple of years. And I really wish you well. God bless
thanks.
you.
Thanks. And I'd like to say that it's been a pleasure for me. And I tell people a lot, Anthony, that you were the first person from church to actually come and pick me up from the rehab and take me out to coffee. Yeah,
I forgot.
Yeah, no, you're my first point of contact. So I had Ian, but when I put my hand up that day, I gave my number to someone. I can't remember who it was. It was either Cherish or Rodney, and you were the person that rang me, and you picked me up, took me out for coffee. And the whole time, I'm like, what is this guy's angle? What's he want from me? I'm in rehab. I've got nothing to give, but he keeps ringing me. He keeps loving on me,
Yeah.
And it dawned on me that there was no angle. You just, just wanted to introduce me to God. And I'll be forever grateful for that.
Yeah.
You're definitely one of the people, I think you know how I feel about you. You're definitely one of the people that has helped me in this journey.
Thanks, mate. It's a beautiful thing about the Holy Spirit. When He's in our lives, He makes us want to be more Christ-like.
Yep.
And, because religion without it actually changing your life is actually quite dangerous. It's actually quite repulsive. But I've always believed a genuine relationship with Christ will have profound implications in the way we deal with other people and show God's love to other people.
Yeah. And that's why I'm happy with the learnings I get
absolutely.
from people like you, from people like the Salvation Army, all of Capital Edge. I've got a home group, a Connect group, all that stuff. And that's where I get my teachings. It's not from a book, it's from other people showing me how to love. More importantly, showing me how to love myself.
I suppose what I really wanted to say is I can see that in you.
Yeah.
I can see just your desire to want to help others is in itself evidence of the Holy Spirit at work in you, which is awesome. Yeah.
Doing a good job, I tell you.
Thanks, mate. We'll call it quits there.
Thank you very much, Anthony.